Good morning, good evening. Those of you who are coming in, we're glad that you are here. We'll start in a couple of minutes. See those numbers going up. Welcome to the 43, 44 of you who are here. Let's see. See some names that I recognize, see lots of names I don't recognize, which is fantastic. Good morning, Natalie. Hi, Denise, Emily, Emmanuel, Donald, Drew, Anna, Hannah. Welcome. We're glad that you are here. Hi, Shirley. Morning. Morning. Carla. Hello. Marie, welcome. Glad that you are here. Hope you are doing well. And my mom is on, in case anyone is wondering. So, welcome, Mom. And we'll get started here in a minute. And welcome to the new people who have just coming in. Laura, hello. Emily, Chris. Hi, Cheryl. Henry, welcome, welcome. And Heather, Jennifer, Jade, and another Jennifer, Jessica, Jessica. Hello, hello. Hi, Laura. Hi, Lynn Marie. I'm not getting all of you because there's a lot and it's growing by the second here. So, hi, Nara, Lisette. Glad you're with us, Lynn Marie. Welcome and good morning or good evening, wherever this may find you. Could be the middle of the night for some of you. If you don't mind, for those of you who are near a keyboard, could you just drop a line and tell us where physically you are located today? It's always helpful to just hear and get a sense of where people are coming in. I know probably a lot were from South Florida, but a lot from outside as well. Hi, Tony, Fort Lauderdale. Miami, some folks on campus. Great. We're glad that you are here. San Juan from Puerto Rico. Good morning. Good morning. Jersey. Hello, West Palm. Great. Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, this is wonderful. Thank you to those of you who are coming from afar. Thank you to those of you who are coming from near. It is my pleasure to be hosting the next Leading Well with Paula, and I'll introduce her, Paula Fagundes-Ventura, and I'll introduce her in a second. But I should introduce myself. My name is Nathan Hiller, and I'm executive director at the Center for Leadership and a professor in the College of Business. We are geeks about leadership here at the Center for Leadership, and we love thinking about and exploring and talking about leadership and helping leaders find small adjustments that can have a significant impact in their leadership. We run programs for individuals. We have free events like this. We're also engaged in research and a lot of the marrying this idea of research and the practical world. And we're constantly talking to fantastic leaders and fantastic individuals who work with leaders. And that is a great entree to Paula Fagundes-Ventura, who is here with us today. Paula, you are located in Miami, in a different part of Miami this morning. But Paula hails originally from Brazil, and where she grew up and has a degree, first degree from FGV, from Fundação Getúlio Vargas. That's my best
That's
Brazilian
perfect.
Portuguese, and a master's in social and organizational psychology from Columbia. She moved from New York during the pandemic to Miami and has made Miami home. We are kind of neighbors, and has been with Goldman Sachs for, I think, 20 years now. Is that right, Paula?
That's right. That's right. About 20 years this summer.
And officially, Paula's role is that she is the managing director and Head of Succession Planning, Leadership Advisory, and Coaching at Goldman Sachs. So, Paula, welcome. We're glad that you are here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nathan, for having me. It's my pleasure. And hello, everyone.
Before we get into some of the meat, can you
Hmm.
tell us a little? I gave a little bit of an intro to
Yeah.
you. Tell us whatever you'd like a little bit more about you and how you ended up here with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the sharing the story of how we met, Nathan. So I'll get to that in a moment. But professionally, my role really entails in practice spending. I usually explain a third of my time, a third managing our succession practice, a third managing our leadership practice, leadership advisory, which entails coaching and assessments and all, different types of high touch engagement with executives here at the firm, and a third as an executive coach myself, which is my lifelong passion, is the craft of working directly with leaders and helping them achieve their goals, drive their performance, and be the best versions of themselves they can be in leading their teams and in their lives. So that's professionally what I do day to day. And as Nathan mentioned, we moved as a family to Miami in 2021. And it happened that I was commuting to work, listening to a podcast about coaching technology, I believe, with the Harvard, I think it was the Harvard Institute of Coaching podcast. And the person being interviewed spoke about Nathan and the Center for Leadership's work. And I said, this is so cool that such group exists right here in my backyard. So I stalked Nathan on LinkedIn and I introduced myself, and that's how we met and gotten to get to know each other. And as he said, geek out on all things leadership ever since.
And when we get together, there's always a million things that we talk about and learning from each other. So we'll have some of that conversation, I hope, then here today. And for the participants here, we want to add value for you in a number of ways. In addition to getting to know a little bit about Paula's story, as you heard, we want to provide an avenue for you to ask some questions a little bit later on. We're going to create some space for that. But we're going to introduce a framework to you, and we're going to talk about some of the way she approaches coaching and how it's been able to be successful. Just as one note here, we're not talking about any specific individuals within her work, but there'll be an amalgam of the kinds of things that she has seen and heard about from other coaches as well too. So right, we're not talking about anyone specific at Goldman, but we're going to be diving into this framework called immunity to change, or give people a glimpse into it, which no matter where you are, if you're leading, if you're not, if you're a student, if you're an adult, whatever you're doing, these things are this framework can be really powerful, both personally and professionally. And Paula and I both really love this framework, and so that is one of the goals that we want you to be able to explore and at least get a taste a little bit of what this is, and we can point you to some resources to find out more that hopefully will add value to you. So that is the goal for us over the next. We have about 47 minutes to do so, and we will have everyone out of here a number of minutes before the top of the hour. So we'll go till about 52 minutes after the hour, just so you can all plan for what is ahead here today. So maybe should we start with one of the scenarios, Paula? That might be a great place to start. And thank you for sharing a little bit about some of this, some of what you have here so far. So, Jane, so we're going with a hypothetical person named Jane. Jane. So, Matt, put yourself in this scenario. So everyone who's on this webinar, just kind of think about how you would approach this. So you're working with Jane, and her challenge is that she's working closely with a peer in another part of the organization. And this person's name is Stefan, whose style is dismissive, or is perceived as dismissive, territorial, and inconsistent in following through. In other words, he doesn't play nice with others, and sometimes is difficult in getting things done in a collaborative fashion, but he's not totally horrible either. Um, no single interaction is overtly problematic. It's not like he's overly hostile or anything like that. But the cumulative effect of this is growing frustration from his peers, including Jane, slowed decision making, and increased reluctance to engage directly. In other words, people don't want to work with him. But Jane and others have to. So Jane is in this situation where she and others find themselves looping in others, over preparing and working around Stefan just to maintain momentum. The challenge is, how do you address this interpersonal dynamic directly without escalating tension or damaging a critical cross organization relationship? Like, this relationship needs to be effective. They all need each other. But how do you address this when you don't have authority? So with that scenario, Paula, I will let you have the floor for, like, what would you do in a general sense? And of course, there's many ways to approach this, but
Yeah.
we're going to hear from Paula. So,
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're in this webinar and you've never experienced something like this, or you've never heard something like this, if your spouse has never experienced this, please shout. Interpersonal challenges in the workplace are very common across the board. And so this is meant to capture the idea that in working together, you will find people with different styles and you might have challenges along the way. And oftentimes in coaching, we're helping a leader identify the sources of those challenges and find productive ways to address them. So we can think about this challenge, as Nathan said, from a variety of perspectives. But if we think of immunity to change, it is a powerful tool to consider in looking at this challenge. So you might say, if you're Jane, your goal is to have a productive relationship with Stefan. You depend on the work that his function does to get your work done. Obviously, the ideal state is a productive partnership. However, it sounds like from the description of the scenario, and this is very common, the behavior is doing everything but working on the relationship, going around the person, looping in other people, all sorts of avoiding techniques. So you have a goal, but your behavior could be seen on the surface as going almost against that goal. You're avoiding the person that you're looking to build a trusted, effective partnership with. And why is that? Now, we don't know Jane. Jane is a hypothetical person, but it's possible that Jane has what we call in the immunity to change framework a competing commitment. While one of her goals is to build an effective partnership with Stefan, another goal that is not quite at the surface level, but it's also there, is avoiding conflict. A competing commitment that is in the way of an effective relationship is avoiding conflict. Now,
okay, can I just pause because I
please.
want to re-emphasize for people, right? For because this is a key idea.
Mhm,
This idea that we often are motivated to do something,
mhm,
but underlying it, we have a commitment, and this is often unacknowledged.
mhm.
Like, we're often not aware of it,
That's below the surface commitment.
a
That's right.
below the surface commitment that keeps us, or that is acting as a blocker to us
Mhm,
getting where we say we want to go, because
mhm,
because that's also saying, but we also want to go here. Okay, so
mhm.
what would Jane's competing commitment be again?
Yeah, it might be avoiding conflict at all costs. It might be a competing commitment of not taking risks and extending an olive branch first. It might be a competing commitment on not being seen as the person who's taking the first step. It could be any kind of commitment. Now, where do these commitments come from? They come from patterns in our lives. One who has grown to be well equipped to handle conflict might not have such a commitment. But if for whatever reason Jane in her life had a lack of experience in handling conflict constructively, if she's been around conflict that's been mishandled, if she
Hmm?
was in a relationship where there was a lot of conflict and she has some sort of scarring from that, conflict equals or engaging with a person with it where there's a risk of creating conflict
Hmm.
could be
Hmm.
seen as something that she's looking to avoid. So the big assumption underneath that conflict is if I try to talk to Stefan about our working rhythm and I try to make things better, it might escalate and this will be even worse for both parties. See, my Freudian slip there is I'm trying to encourage Jane, right, in this work that a direct relationship would be worthwhile trying, but Jane's big assumption is it could be much worse if I try to
Hmm.
engage.
Hmm.
So I'm
Hmm.
doing all
Hmm.
things of going around. Again, this is a hypothetical scenario, and
Hmm.
if we want to show the slide that shows the kind of flow that we're describing here. You have the goal, you have the behavior against the
Hmm.
goal. Why is that? Because there's a competing commitment.
So
Where
can
does
we
the
go over
competing?
the goal then again? So the goal is,
Yep, building an effective partnership with Stefan.
okay, okay.
What am
But the
I doing?
behaviors now are sort of going in the opposite of that because you're going around it. You kind of written Stefan off almost, right?
It,
This is one
exactly,
possibility that Jane has kind of
exactly.
written off. Like I have to find a way around because this is really frustrating.
Yeah,
But I also kind of need it. So I have these things that are at odds with each other. Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure because I think we are so used to thinking this through, and that it's easy to kind of slip through, and it
yeah,
seems simple, but it's incredibly profound once you
yeah,
work through this. So for those of you who are here, we're working through this process because if you learn this, you can
yeah.
apply this to anything,
Yeah, yeah. By the way,
in a really powerful way.
we
So.
didn't mention that this framework comes from the work of Bob Keegan and Lisa Leahy from Harvard. And the first time I was exposed to this framework was in a workshop delivered by Lisa Leahy, and I thought, "Gosh, I have no idea what she's talking about. This is going way over my head." So, to your point, Nathan, is it seems almost a counterintuitive way to think about it, but once you get it, again, that's why we love it because it can be so powerful in surfacing um, those under the tip of the iceberg commitments that are often in the way
Mhm.
of getting to us to achieve our goals, right?
Mhm.
Lisa
Mhm.
Leahy's
Mhm.
example is people go to the doctor. This is research studies show that people go to the doctor. The doctor says if you don't change your diet, you will die, and you still have something like two-thirds of people won't change their diet
Right.
even when stakes are that high. Why? Because of
Yeah.
those competing commitments underneath the surface.
So Veronica asked, is this a blind spot? How would you respond to that?
It is a form of a blind spot if you're not able to see it. Yes, in
Hmm.
for sure.
Hmm.
Yes, yes.
A goal and a behavior that's working against this and a hidden goal. Okay. So
Yeah, so it's a
it can be
kind
a
of
bit of
blind
a blind
spot, right?
spot
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
and I just want to point out that the way we're approaching this here, and sometimes this might involve Stephen or Stefan actually changing, but what we're working on here is Jane's approach to this,
Yes.
right? So we're saying you can't necessarily change somebody, but like let's
Mhm.
look inward here to see what might actually be causing this. So it takes a
Yeah,
level of courage, I guess you would
yeah,
say, right?
yeah.
For Jane to be actually thinking about maybe I'm contributing to this in some way. Like maybe I'm not helping the situation.
Yeah, yeah. What's my another line of thinking? Not to digress from immunity change, but I'm a big fan of the work, the conscious leadership work. And one of the things that you see in that line of work is what's my role in it in any given situation. What's my role in it? And an attempt to gain agency in difficult situations as opposed to being at the mercy of what the situation is doing. Yes, Stefan
Hmm.
might be a difficult person. He might be doing things indeed that are um, territorial, as you said in the case. But we can't change him. We can't change him. And trying to change him is a fool's errand. But what can I do? And so in this case, what is the conversation that I'm not having that should be had? Right, and that's we don't know if it's going to work or not, but that's regaining agency in this situation as opposed to sitting there and talking to everybody in your life about how difficult Stefan is, but Stefan himself.
So Jane is saying, I want this. but acting in a way that's a little bit different. And so what is the hidden goal in this scenario as you see it, or one of the possibilities?
A hidden goal might be I don't want to create overt conflict.
Okay.
I fear creating overt. I fear having a difficult conversation with Stefan. The big assumption that any
So the hidden
attempt.
goal is often a fear,
Mhm,
right?
exactly,
So there's often
exactly.
a fear here. Okay, then the
Yeah.
big assumption is what?
The big assumption is any attempt at engaging with Stefan will lead to conflict, will worsen the working relationship. Right?
Mm,
That's an assumption that, again, it's not the truth, is an assumption. And again, those assumptions and those commitments come from patterns in our lives, usually. I mean, always.
okay. So where do we go from here then? How do you work with Jen?
We once we name what's not seen, again, as one of our colleagues said here, the blind spot, then you can go into that's the inner work, right? That's the inner work around surfacing those assumptions. From there you can then go into behavior. What does the conversation look like? What's the language that will most likely yield a positive outcome? How do you state your needs in a non-accusatory way? How do you focus on shared outcomes? How do you focus on shared goals? And how do you set in partnership certain norms in terms of how the teams will operate? Those would all be the kinds of things that once we do the inner work, we can do what we say called the outer work. In
So
this case, is possibly practicing for a conversation, Stefan.
so a series of small experiments to see if in fact, if I approach him directly, does the relationship collapse?
Exactly,
Would be one
exactly,
possibility, right? So,
exactly.
in other words, let me think if I'm doing the thing that I don't want to do, if I do the
Mm,
opposite because I'm
mm,
scared of it, what actually might happen? And is
mm-hmm.
that true? And can I test that assumption? In other words, like, can I think about a possibility where conflict, I can approach conflict not as a bad thing, but actually as productive? Can I think
Exactly.
about ways to approach Stefan that are a little bit different?
Mm,
How do I kind of test this? I mean, I love so we'll talk a little bit more about this, but so what I love about this is that here to me is one of the secrets. And I'd like you to help me reframe this, Paula,
mm,
because you work with this really all the time. This is one of the things I know you work with quite regularly, right? Is that constantly in our lives we have goals,
mm-hmm.
and it's not that we don't want to achieve them. We often do. We have things that we can't and we're not able to make.
Mm,
If it's eating better, if it's
mm,
the way that we're parenting, we're
mm,
playing the nice parent, or we're
mm,
playing the boss that doesn't want to
mm,
hold our team accountable or things like that.
mm,
Um, but we say we want something else.
mm,
Usually underlying that, there's some reason why we keep doing the thing that we don't want to do
mm,
because it's
mm,
actually giving us a hit of dopamine, a hit of success because it's worked, right? Like there's
mm,
some things that it does. It protects us.
mm,
It allows us to exist in our world.
mm.
Is the right way to think about this like we have one foot on the gas pedal. We're trying to go one direction, but we
Yeah.
don't even realize we've actually have our foot on the brake.
Yep.
Like so,
100%.
like we're going forward, but like wait a second. And so this is a chance to look at that foot that's on the brake
Mm.
and say,
Yeah.
why am I doing? Wait a second here. What am I
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah.
Okay, so the
But
floor
that
is yours.
doesn't that require, if you put yourself in Jane's shoes, a certain level of vulnerability, right? The small is experiment is just, I love your language. I'm always using that language. Client, small experiments. What's the worst that could happen? What's the cost of taking this step? What are the multitude of outcomes? Instead of thinking there's only one path. If I talk to Stefan, it's
Okay.
conflict, things will be worse. What are the many other possible outcomes? But that requires, as much as that might be in our language, a small experiment, it is a place of vulnerability to trying something new and not actually knowing it may not work, right? As coaches, we're not trying to convince our clients that they
Mm,
live in fantasy land. It may not work, but How about what if it does? And what if 30 minutes engaging and talking about expectations and ways to collaborate effectively, etc. What if that changes months and years in a partnership, right? What is it? How can we look at the possibilities?
Mhm.
That's the power. That's what excites us as coaches, is the possibility that once you get unstuck, to use the name of our webinar, when you unlock something that's is seemingly small on the surface, but can be so powerful. But it does require a certain level of vulnerability. The other thing it requires is, I love the expression loosen the grip, is a little bit of loosening the grip on who Stefan is as a person, right? I
Okay,
have this
interesting. Okay.
very strong view. By the way, my view isn't it's not that I'm seeing things. I've seen Stefan's behavior, right? I mean, he sent that email to the boss saying something not very nice about my team, right? Stefan did go around me when that important decision. So I've seen these, but can I
Mhm.
loosen the grip on who he is as a person? Can I see something more than the person who's um, the, the the person that owns those behaviors, right? Can I see the possibility that he may not want to be that way, or he doesn't have enough, he's never worked with someone collaboratively, not because he wants, but because he's never had the experience, right? Whatever it might be, even if those are just thought experiments, so that we go into that conversation with our grip not super tight.
I love it. Someone just mentioned a book that's a little bit related to this, and I have it on my desk here. And I'm not going to pull it up here, but the book
I love that book.
Chatter by Ethan
It's
Cross, yeah,
Yes,
which
it's
is
an excellent
kind of
book.
also related to this of like we're constantly telling ourselves stories, and
Yeah,
we're constantly our brain is making sense of the world around us
yeah,
in a
yeah,
variety of ways, right? And
yeah,
so we often don't stop and listen to what some of that chatter is. And that's a sort of a I'm doing a somewhat of a disservice to the book, right? But one
yeah,
of the kind of ideas of this, Leslie, thank you for bringing that up.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
And when I teach some workshops that it's basically teaching coaching tools that others can take on and apply. And one of the ones I love that I'm sure is in Chatter is this idea of looking at your own inner talk as a third person, right? The research shows that third person talk is very powerful in creating the just enough emotional distance so
Hmm.
we can see if what's happening here is our stories or if they are real facts.
Okay.
And we
Okay.
tell stories, our brain is wired to tell stories because stories create a community. And we are here because of communities. We've survived because we were able to form groups, and in groups, our species has been able to thrive. And yet that storytelling capability can come in the way because I see Stefan send that email. I already make a story that he's out to get me, and
Hmm.
therefore we can't do this, and there can never be an effective partnership. And by the way, I
Hmm.
don't like conflict, so I'm not going to talk to Stefan, but I'm going to talk to 10 other people about how
Mm.
horrible Stefan is, right? All of these are stories, and we're not saying that they are entirely fictitious, but if we get locked in the story, we get stuck.
Interesting. Yeah, I love it. So can we do a quick other scenario that's not in the context of work, just so sort of I think this kind of simplifies
Sure.
it a little bit. And I'm gonna put this for everyone here. And we'll just talk through this here real quick, right? So you have an improvement goal to establish a sustainable 30-minute daily exercise routine.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably relevant for some of you. This is relevant for
Mm-hmm.
me and everybody, The doing, not doing. Okay. So here's what the trap that people get in. Okay, you start off great. You do a great job for a couple days and you
Mm-hmm.
go all in. And but then one day you have 20 minutes and like you don't have 30 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
so you just don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and things get busy, of course. Um, in this scenario, here's a possibility that one hidden competing commitment is
Mm-hmm.
that I am, and I'm just saying I in general, but I think this is plot, right? This is believable that like I can't do it halfway. I either have to do it all or nothing. And like
Mm-hmm.
uh I'm an all or nothing person, or I have an elite identity of like, no, 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 I have to go all in. I have to prove that I'm really great. So then I don't do
Mm-hmm.
it. And so the assumption is that doing a mediocre workout,
Mm-hmm.
um, that's not me. I want
Yeah.
to do things all or not, right? And so I just don't do it. So
Mm-hmm.
so I have these things. This one commitment on one hand is I want to get in better shape. Second one is if it's not perfect, I can't do it. If the
Mm-hmm.
conditions aren't just right, I'm not going to do it because that's not me. What would you say about this scenario? And put in the chat if anyone has some. This
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great example. I've worked with people who've described that very pattern, Nathan, of this idea of the perfectionistic tendencies that get in the way of I missed it today. I can go back tomorrow.
I'll
Right? So
double
that
up tomorrow, right?
right or I just missed it. I just missed it,
Mm.
and we're back at and again the big assumption is this idea of where does that come from? Where does the perfectionism come from? Um, One of the things that the last class that we did together, we had some of these exercises of filling the blanks exercises, right? Of course, I need to be excellent in order to complete the sentence, right? That's a way to surface what's behind then that perfectionistic need. And once it's imagine just you have a wire all kind of wrangled and you start like pulling the pieces so you understand what's behind that, the perfectionistic tendency. Where does that come from? Well, that comes from I've the most important things that happened in my life were because I was all or nothing. That may be true, but what are the possibilities? Where are the other times that you might not be paying attention to that you achieved something great that it wasn't because of perfect. So that's how you
Mm.
start to explore, and these are all obviously very personal, and but that's one path we could take in that
Could
very example.
could people work on this? So, could people work on this with a trusted friend?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you have a friend who's got, I would say, a kind of a minimal level of psychological inclination. I don't know if that phrase makes sense, but someone who gets humans, not in a professional way, and you look at the framework together. Yes, I think it's much easier to do this in conversation versus on your
Yeah,
own.
yeah.
If not in conversation, the next best is to write, and you can just Google immunity to change, and you find these tables that go through the each of the steps. Writing is a great way to also do it if you'd like to do on your own.
I have not done it, but I would guess that you could ask AI to say, "Hey, walk me through an immunity to change framework based on this." That could probably put something together for you and actually
Mm,
be an interesting
No,
sparring partner. What do you think?
no doubt, no doubt. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. For those of you who have never tried to use AI for developmental purposes, um, I'm shocked. And I don't know what you think, Paula, but I mean, we've been testing this in a number of ways. We came up with a pretty simple, but really great Gemini gem. And if anyone wants it, we will share it with you on this. Just send someone at the center an email, and we'll share it with you. It's basically some of the wisdom and things that we've been working with leaders on for the last 17 years into a slightly programmed gem. So you get the benefit of Gemini in this case, could be something else too, but and then some of what we have with the center, and we're happy to share that with you. But it's really interesting to think about that as one additional but imperfect partner. So just for other people who want to think about working this through and getting unstuck. I know this was incredible. The first time I saw this, I sat with it for quite a few hours, just thinking like, oh my goodness, where I was seeing things that I hadn't seen before. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah. My
but
encouragement to everybody is to pick something in their lives they're stuck. It can be big, it can be small, and give it a try. There's no replacement to actually putting in your own stakes into
yeah.
something like this, and see if it clicks. And it can be quite powerful.
Can we sort of talk more broadly about some of your, and I want to open it up to if for those of you who just have a kind of a general question, could be something specific, please put your questions in the chat and we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. So if you want that, send the email to lead@fiu.edu. It's simple, and we'll make sure you get that gem. We've named our gem, and her name is Clara, Clara, which is a play on the also on the Spanish word claro, clear. So we love it, and we've launched it a number of weeks ago. But if we can think about the sort of coaching more broadly in some of your conversations that you have and conversations with other coaches, because you're really in a coaching community, what are some of the things you're seeing right now? How are people adapting? Are people struggling right now? Because in one sense, I feel like we're in this AI psychosis in that people are
Mm,
thinking about it all the time. People are worried. People worried about jobs. We've got all this overhang. Like
mm.
what's the pulse of other coaches? What are they kind of what are you seeing? Because it's these are crazy times.
Yeah, yeah. For the most part, is I think this raises questions around what's inherently human and how do we harness that. In some ways, I'd say the optimistics feel like there's an opportunity to bring focus to the war, to leadership, because of if knowledge is commoditized, then what are you left with? You're left with ethical thinking. You're left with judgment. You're left with EQ. You're left with curiosity. These capabilities that, at least in the near term, AI won't replace. And so, how do you harness? In some ways, this work becomes even more important because it's always been about those traits as opposed to knowledge. What do I do in the situation that's technical in nature? How do I make this particular decision? Right? The coaching is never been about that at its core. So it's somewhat exciting for our industry because this technology introduces such huge questions around the about human edge and the value of effective leadership.
You have a in your leadership role at Goldman, um, what do you wish that you knew? And this isn't planned, right? So I'm putting you on the
Hmm.
spot. You can
Hmm.
choose to answer this
Yeah,
however you
you
want.
said it. I
Uh,
didn't.
what do you wish that you, and so this may not even be this may not be related to your specific role in right now, but
Yeah,
it just and in leading, right? Like
yeah,
what do you know now that you wish you would have known 5 or 10 years ago?
yeah, yeah, yeah. uh, that each person's this is something that a student in your class articulated, um, that is something I think is very important, which is I think he said each person is a universe. So the idea that my world, I am the only one who understands my world, and Nathan, you're the only one who understands your world. And there, as much as we might be in the same field, we might be around same generation, like there is a war. I mean, so much daylight between us as human beings, and so the idea of clear, direct, courageous communication, which in fact ties a little bit to the scenario. But how much pain and drama exists in organizations because so much is in my head and so very little what's in my head is visible to you and vice versa. And I'm not talking about conflict or issues. I'm just talking about the way I see the world. I experience this webinar in a different way you do because we're different people. And so for me, that's something as I've grown more experience as a leader, be in relationship with direct reports and expectations, in how I read situations, be in relationships with peers or bosses, um, just the need to articulate my interpretation of situations and my
Okay.
expectations
Okay.
is
Okay.
quite it seems very simple, but I find it to be instrumental.
The so what I'm hearing, so this is a bit of a test of this, right? So here, tell me what what I think I'm hearing you say, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
it changes how you set expectations and communicate to others, and also changes maybe how you pull. So tell me if this, how you
Mm-hmm.
try to pull out of other people
Mm-hmm.
uh an understanding of where they're coming from or why
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah,
how, right?
I don't think I said that explicitly, but yes, absolutely, absolutely. A direct report comes with a complaint. This is frustrating, blah, blah, blah.
That's a
I,
so
I,
what we just did, by the way, is what
mm,
Paula does all the time, much better than I, right? But there's a that's a
yeah,
really cool coaching technique, by the way. Like, this is what I'm hearing, which
yeah,
gives almost every time, if you say this is what I think I'm hearing, and every time the other person will add to it or clarify in a way that is very helpful, by the way. So just as a general technique, oh my goodness, that is gold.
yeah.
When I learned that, I was like, where has this been hiding my whole life?
Mm,
Because we, to your point that we're in different
mm.
worlds, then you then said, I don't think I said this, but, and now I interrupted you, so I'm going to
Yeah,
stop.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was a great editorial on that, because it is very valuable. But I was going to say, as an example, might be, let's say a direct report comes frustrated about a situation with another person. First of all, just the understanding as to whether they're coming to me so that I can help, or so that I can demonstrate some level of empathy, or so that I'm aware that they're going through a challenge. There might be a multitude of, I might just interpret it. And if there are potentially 10 different reasons why they're coming to me, if I go ahead and interpret, I will be wrong 9 out of 10 times. So, okay, so and so, I hear you describing the situation, sounds very challenging. What would you like from me? Right? That's one step into clarifying what's happening for us. By the way, if I can put myself in their shoes, and I might be frustrated about that situation for a different reason than that person is frustrated. I might be frustrated because I value efficiency. They might be frustrated because they value respect. Now, it's not that one doesn't, it's not that I don't respect what she respects and vice versa, but kind of in the rank order of priorities, maybe for me is efficiency, for her is respect. Right. And if we don't clarify that, again, we might pursue a particular path that doesn't solve the need of my direct report. It might solve my
Mhm.
need if I were in their shoes, but not their need. So again, it's another way, another example of what's that clarity can avoid so much drama.
Can you be a good leader without? So, I mean, maybe this is a
Of course.
rhetorical question based on what we're saying, but uh, and I guess where this is coming from, there's a belief among, let's just people, not necessarily people just in context of leading, but we'll talk about leaders here now. Can you be a good leader, a truly effective leader without knowing your team?
Oh, without knowing your team strikes me as very, very challenging. I can't think of a situation. I can't think of a
Like, and I guess
I
what
think
I'm
I think I
thinking
think
of.
in a
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, I always think of like, you're Coaching is contextual. You don't coach in a crisis. So can you effectively lead, let's say the building is catching fire right now. Can you effectively lead the people out of the building in safety, even though they're a bunch of strangers? Yes, for sure, one might be effective at doing that, but that's a point in time crisis situation, right? In the long haul, in a context filled with complexity, with nuance, and it's probably challenging. I
So
can't think of how that would be
yeah,
possible.
I mean, I agree, and I think of I'm thinking of people who I have coached over the years, and I'm thinking of several who really and this maybe there's someone on the call who sort of thinks this too of like, no, I keep my work and personal separate, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
part of the challenge of working through an individual with like that is like you don't need to share deep dark secrets, but you have to know what drives them. You have to
Yeah.
know something about them as people because what will motivate one person is very different from someone else. Someone just wants a day off, whereas
Yeah.
someone wants more than anything a some
A
micro
pat in the back.
promotion because the title or the status or something, and we can't presume and related to this idea of the platinum rule, right? Which is we often want to treat people as we want to be treated, but the platinum rule, that's a golden rule. The platinum rule is we should treat others as they want to be treated. And we often just treat people, we think we're doing a great job if we treat them the
Mm-hmm.
way we want to be treated, but
Yeah.
sometimes that's not the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not the same thing. And I know your points about communication, about sort of underlying, we're seeing this again, around like, what is your assumption? What is it that you're valuing? What do you need? Because we can't
Mm.
presume that that actually is, or we do presume, but we can't
Yeah.
presume that that's right in a
Exactly.
world to be most effective. So
Exactly.
okay,
Exactly. Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I will always tell emerging leaders the one question for your team should be, what makes you tick? What gets you out of bed in the morning? And oftentimes leaders are surprised by what they hear.
Hmm,
Um,
hmm,
and
hmm.
I've heard about this book that someone posted called The Life of Chuck, but I'd never read it. So now it kind of uh, goes up on my reading list. Thank
So
you for sharing.
someone shared, and I don't think everyone else can see it. Each person is a universe. This idea, The Life of Chuck by Stephen King. So thank you, Marie, Dr. Marie Barnes, for that hit. I haven't seen it or heard of it, but I'll have to check it out. So that's great. Thank you. Um, where um, can you talk to us? So you interface with the idea of coaching, and we haven't sort of abstracted to coaching more generally. Can you talk about a leader's role or like a leader as coach? What does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? Because it's not all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
like what does that look like when you help coach leaders, but you also help coach leaders to be better coaches, right? So can you
Yeah.
talk about that however you'd like?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say that we are trained, at least in this cultural construct, to have answers. And a leader as coach, the exercise for a leader as coach is to recognize that, to foster an environment where other people can have answers as well. And what that requires is goes back to a looser grip. Can you sit down with someone and consider the possibility that they could have a solution to a situation that's equally as good as yours or possibly even better?
Hmm.
And it sounds like the easiest thing in the world, but that requires a variety of skills. First of all, it requires the mindset of humility that you're not the only one with good answers. It also requires good listening. It also requires creating psychological safety because if your team is unwilling to disagree with you, then you're not going to hear that great idea. It requires taking the risk of pursuing the idea that was suggested by someone and seeing it through. So there are many skills involved with that. But I think at the premise of it goes back to not blaming any given person. Culturally, it's what's expected of most people in organizations having answers, is solving problems.
Hmm.
But if you're going to scale as a leader, you can't be the one solving everything by definition. But that's at any given level of leadership. The next level, it just feels a notch harder to do that, right? Once you go from 10 direct reports to 100, you need to do that. It's a little harder. You go from 100 to 1,000, even harder. So that's the sort of thing I work with leaders on. And I wrote an article with the Hudson Institute of Coaching where I trained last year, which I'm happy to share with you, to share with anybody who might be interested, that talks very much about this idea, taking a developmental approach to leadership, and what are some of the practices and strategies leaders can deploy to be leaders as coaches context when the context enables that, right? Not if the building is catching on fire, but when the context calls for it, how to deploy those strategies.
One of the questions I want to touch on here is, do you have any best practices for building psychological safety? And maybe I'll put a second question on it, which is, our psychological safety has huge merit. Can we go lean too hard into this idea that we need to create psychological safety? So maybe we'll start with
Well,
what is it first, and then what are some best practices for building it within limits?
yeah, I'm not a psychological safety expert, and I do, but I will share with all due respect to the many great researchers who write about this. I think this term scares leaders. I think the term psychological, like the both words, scare leaders. So
I agree. I agree. Yeah, 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 yeah.
I go back to
Yep.
the basics, which is, can you see the people around you as full, complex humans with ambitions, needs, complexities, nuances, personal problems, etc.? And can you create an environment where people can have open dialogue um, on what they need as far as professionally, right? Motivations, drives, ambitions, etc.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
where can they talk openly about mistakes,
Yep.
concerns? So, what is it for your team that would enable that? For some teams, it's regular forums. For some teams, it's one-to-one conversations. In oftentimes is, how do you reward people when they come and talk about mistakes, how calmly you react to them. It's how do you recognize visibly the behaviors you want. Just goes back to, I think, good leadership. Good leadership sets good culture. Good culture entails people feeling safe and open to engage with each other. I don't mean to dismiss how
Hmm.
complicated that is, but I am not always sure the label helps versus scares people, because there is a sense of psychological safety. We can talk about anything, anything goes. We, as a leader, we have this expectation of creating this ideal state. I just think it's good human skills, and it's EQ, it's open dialogue, it's recognition strategies, etc.
And I think my one of the things as you're talking that struck me is that sometimes people will say, I have an open door policy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's always to me a bit of a yellow flag. And here's why. So maybe your reaction to this. When someone, oh, I have an open door policy. Well, no one cares what your policy is. What
Mm-hmm.
happens in reality when your door is
Mm-hmm.
open? Do
Right.
people feel like they can come in? And by the way,
Right.
having an open door at all times is not necessarily a good leadership strategy. You don't
Yep.
want to be available necessarily at all times because
Yep.
that
Yep.
can create
There's
a
spout.
situation where you're solving all the problems, right? So
Yeah,
like
you're
to
not
me, that's
scaling.
such a nuanced like thing, but it's part of it is related to, I think what people are getting at is psychological safety, whatever we want to call it. That's one of the things pieces of this that how do we create an environment where people can say, hey, I don't know how to do this, or hey, I need help, or hey, I need to be available. But
Mhm.
there's kind of maybe also some limits to that. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
have any
yeah.
thought. This is
What
my hot
the
take
other
at the end.
the other thing I'm thinking as I say those things out loud is I think there's something to be said about there might be 10 research validated strategies to create psychological safety, out of which nine are really not authentic to who I am as a leader. And so
Hmm.
what's your thing? What's the thing you're really good at that you can do authentically, genuinely that fosters it? I think having one of those goes much farther than trying 10 that are not really who you are as a person. So
I,
if for
that's
you, if
that's
for
awesome.
you demonstrating gratitude is something that gives you that you're good at and it gives you tremendous joy, and at the end of the day calling the person on your team and saying, hey, really good job getting through that difficult situation, is that something that feels like you do it has an impact, have at it with that, and that will be one element of creating psychological safety. But if your thing
Yeah.
is hosting a group meeting where people talk about mistakes and do effective postmortems, and that's one way, if you're really good at that, lean in on that. If you're really good at remembering birthdays, if that's your thing, lean in on that. Right, there's so many ways to foster good culture, and I think much more important than having a playbook is having the how do you call in your course, Nathan? It's self-development, right? The self-discovery process of you as a leader. Who you are is how you lead. So who are you, and what are the things that you can bring to the table personally to foster psychological safety, if we want to call it that?
I really want to appreciate you taking the time to be here with us today. This is great.
My
I've got some
pleasure.
great insights. I love the way you ending too of like don't try and do it all. Try and lean into what you can do, what you do well, which is really fantastic. But thank you for your
My
time. Thank
pleasure.
you to all of you who've been here on this webcast here today. We really appreciate you taking your valuable time to be here with us. Our goal is always to deliver as much value as we can and create a community of people who are trying to get better, realizing we don't have all the answers, but we're good at asking questions, we're good at having dialogues, and we want to be good partners with you. So if you haven't signed up for anything at the Center for Leadership, we invite you to continue to stay connected with the center as we engage in things. We have these talks every once in a while, sometimes in person. So for those of you who are further away, it's a little more challenging. But Paula, thank you so much for being here with us today,
My
and thank you
pleasure.
all for joining us. Till next
My
time.
pleasure. Thank you, Nathan. Thank you, FIU team. Bye.